it's not the culture war stuff, it's other stuff. Really? Then what is it? The comic book industry went through a great epiphany at the end of 2023. They finally realized sales are not doing great. Sales of manga and Dogman don't, in fact, make the direct market stronger. In fact, people walking away from comic books altogether, specifically DC and Marvel, ends up being a bad thing in the long run. We've been talking about this here on the channel for a while. All the things that Marvel and DC were doing inch by inch just to push people away, and it has all come to a head at the end of 2023, heading into 2024. Now we can admit there is a problem. Everyone can admit that. They're back on the West bandwagon, but no one is actually willing to admit what that problem is, other than Brian Hibbs, who says that problem is not the culture war. He is very emphatic about that. He wrote a latest Tilting at Windmills newsletter saying that that is not the problem, and then going on for another 15 or 16 paragraphs, never actually encroaching what the problem with quality is in comic books. He starts out, before we go much deeper, let's get the culture war stuff out of the way. Anyone, anywhere who wants to suggest the market's problems have to do with comics being too woke is a total screwball. Full stop. The market always determines what it wants, and things that are not engaging to the audience always go away in favor of things they do engage. Comics will never be exactly what you remember from your childhood, nor should they, because both you and they change or die. Absolutely anyone trying to push that Comicsgate agenda is a bad actor who simply doesn't understand how either the markets or the creative process works, and such people should be shunned and ignored. Oh my goodness, it cannot be the culture war. But you also admit right there is a distinct disconnect between what the publishers are writing and what readers actually want. What is actually driving them away? Could it possibly be turning Superman gay? Could it possibly be making almost every new character under the sun some type of LGBTQ representative? Could it be that you wiped out the entire lineup of Avengers and replaced them with new, younger, more diverse heroes? Perhaps that turned people off, but he never actually mentions what turns people away. Do I think woke comics are the only thing turning people off? Absolutely not. In fact, you will never really hear me use the word woke on the channel. And I certainly don't use the word culture war, but that's how Mr. Hibbs wants to term it. So that's fine. That's the word that we will use, his chosen vernacular there, the word woke. Is woke the only thing destroying comic books? Is it the only thing that's driving people away? Absolutely not. The biggest problem with comic books is that Batman, Superman, Justice League, Avengers, X-Men, and Spider-Man basically are bereft of good stories right now outside of Superman. And unfortunately, while Superman is an A-list character and can carry two simultaneous titles at the same time, he was basically destroyed by Brian Michael Bendis, and the creators working on Superman are trying to pick up the pieces and fix the character so people will actually come back. Brian Michael Bendis actually drove all Superman fans away basically at the same time. X-Men has been an enormous joke. Go read Rise of the House of X, Fall of the House of X, whatever the stupid one that comes out this week from Jerry Duggan is. Go read that and tell me that X-Men are going in a positive direction. Go read the Zeb Wells Spider-Man run and tell me that's in a positive direction. Go read Gotham War and tell me we're getting kick-ass stories with the best characters. There aren't a lot of good writers out there, and some of them are absolutely shoving woke content into Marvel and DC, and that is certainly driving people away. But the biggest problem is there's nothing hot right now. There's nothing that people just can't deny. Like, you know what? I didn't want to go over to the comic book shop this week, but Batman came out this week. And if I don't read it today, it's going to be spoiled on the internet. And I know Batman kicks ass right now. There's not a lot of enthusiasm because there's not a lot of good comic books, because there's a ton of bad writers and editors, some of which are absolutely pushing culture war stuff into comic book. I'll have a few examples here later on in the discussion, but this is what Mr. Hibbs followed it up with. Now, there are absolutely problems that relate to the content, but they're emphatically not the culture war changes. And there are acute problems with the value proposition of comics as well. The content problems, I think, started brewing when deconstructed storytelling became the rule over making sure that each individual comic was, as Heidi is wont to say, a satisfying chunk. Obviously talking about Heidi McDonald, whose Comic Beat basically publishes this newsletter. I don't know, is it quarterly? It's something like that. They're normally very, very long. This one's like half the length. It was a little bit strange Now, when I say deconstructed, what I'm talking about is a character that has basically all the heroic attributes ripped away from them and then filled in the blanks with what the writer would actually like to write. Kind of what Alan Moore would do back in the day, kind of like what Frank Miller would do back in the day, but with no talent for actually doing that. What he's talking about here, I would call decompressed storytelling, to where they're basically writing for the trades, to where you don't actually get a story in one comic book issue, which was absolutely shocking when we saw Titans Beast World #1 that had a beginning, middle, and end. I was like, what is going on here? Somebody wrote a comic book that you could just read and enjoy and then be done with it and still want to read the next one? That never happens in comic books. And I do believe what he is saying there, the issue with decompression within storytelling, writing for the trades, or in this case, I think we're actually to writing for the omnibus in comics in 2023 does not fit the periodic model whatsoever. Most of these stories should be released as graphic novels rather than comic books. I agree with you there, but I do not believe that is the main reason that people are being drove away. But I will say deconstruction of characters, which he uses the term weird there. You know, I guess we all have our own verbiage for this. Deconstruction of characters absolutely is a big part of that. See also Tim Drake Robin, see also Bobby Drake Iceman, see also Alan Scott the Green Lantern, and a host of other characters that modern writers have come in over the last 10 years and decided they needed to destroy them sight unseen to push a little bit of culture war. It certainly appears that way. I have a feeling, and maybe I'm wrong here, and this is just me spitballing. This isn't like a scientific overview of what I think is happening, not just within comic books, but entertainment and basically most of Western society, is it is actually being attacked from the inside, and people are coming in with an agenda to fundamentally change kind of Western culture. And I think we're seeing that happen, but we're at the fast forward portion of it. It's going much faster now, and people are no longer kind of subverting what they're doing or hiding what they're doing. They're being very open about it, and people are noticing, and they're actually walking away. I absolutely believe that is happening. Not just in comic books, but basically everywhere. We just had Cocomelon, a program aimed at 2 to 4-year-olds, include a nice little trans 4-year-old character with 2 dads. Kind of weird if you ask me, but hey, maybe I'm just an enormous bigot and not a parent that is looking out for his child and doesn't want signaling going in there that isn't appropriate for 2 to 4-year-olds. Maybe I'm just absolutely insane. Or maybe Brian Hibbs doth protest too much, and I imagine he's not as dumb as he looks, and he probably knows exactly what's going on here, but he is from San Francisco and probably agrees with most of it. He's just not happy that it isn't working for the most part. He later states, I want to be very clear here. Almost every single person working at a comics publisher is someone who loves the medium very much, and in no way do I believe that anyone is deliberately setting out to make mediocre comics. I think rather that the incentives and corporate expectations of the 2 largest companies, Disney and Warner Brothers Discovery, are very much misaligned with what the audience actually wants. Periodical comics are very distinct from the other kinds of consumer products, in that buying into the Marvel and DC universes are a fundamentally intrinsic part of comics appeal. And I want to be very, very clear right here. There are a whole host of people that are absolutely going into comic books to write mediocre stories, or not even to write superhero stories, or any type of comic book story whatsoever. They're literally just in there to influence people. We literally had a panel that I talked about here on the channel with Alyssa Wong and Charlie Jane Anders and I think Sarah Brunstad. There was an editor from Marvel. I think that's the one that were up there talking about doing it. It was their own words. They weren't disguising it. They're like, oh, we couldn't believe what Marvel and DC allowed us to get away with this year, because they knew they were creating mediocre comic books. They couldn't believe just how badly Alyssa Wong was allowed to gay up Deadpool. And what happened to Deadpool? Did that series make it? I'm told that Deadpool's damn near A-lister. Shockingly, that series was canceled due to low sales and lack of interest in the comic book. Look at Tim Sheridan, because this motherfucker, Brian Hibbs, wants to tell you that culture war and pushing culture war is the worst thing ever, and that it's not a problem in comic books. I distinctly remember Tim Sheridan, DC Comics writer, the guy behind Alan Scott the Green Lantern. Before that, he did Teen Titans Academy. Before that, he did the Shazam series. In fact, in an interview about Teen Titans Academy, he thought it was an exciting opportunity because he got to introduce so many more LGBTQ representative characters in there. He didn't actually want to write a Teen Titans Academy story. Basically, his words right there on a silver platter. but actually went out there on social media in 2 different conversations imploring people that this was about the culture war, that we needed to prove that there are more LGBTQ people out there than not, and support his Green Lantern book. That is the only reason he said people should read it. He never even said it was good, which was smart on his behalf, because if he said it was good, he would have been completely lying. It's a terrible comic book. But the only reason that he wrote it was for culture war purposes. He actually said so. That's why he told you should read the book. Where's the Brian Hibbs article saying that Tim Sheridan is full of shit and that Tim Sheridan is wrong and that is not something that will sell in comic books? And this is not the place for that. It's only a place for good superhero storytelling. I mean, the opportunity was there for you, Brian, to be an equal opportunity person to swat things down. But I imagine he just doesn't have a problem with the Tim Sheridans and the Charlie Jane Anders and the Alyssa Wongs, who also, I remember distinctly, bragged about queering up Star Wars and all these major mainstream properties that used to be billion-dollar entities, but really can't even crack that stuff anymore, because it's not just comic book fans that walked away. It was actually everybody that was interested in the characters all realized all at the same time, like, nah. And the idea that Disney and Warner Brothers Discovery have like this enormous creative oversight of DC Comics and Marvel Comics, I just don't buy it. I don't think David Zaslav knows there's an Alan Scott, the Green Lantern comic book coming out. And if he is aware of it, he certainly doesn't know what's inside of it. Supposedly, Kevin Feige is the chief creative officer over Marvel Comics. I have seen nothing to suggest that anything changed since he took over as the CCO. I think he just got some more job descriptors and probably a little pay bump, but has absolutely done nothing. I believe this is the C.B. Cebulski and Jim Lee show. And Jim Lee, I'm pretty sure, is asleep at the wheel. He's basically there, but he's not doing anything. And I think C.B. Cebulski is probably incompetent enough that he does have a hand in all this stuff. But I don't think it goes all the way up to the top of Disney and Bob Iger dictating all the shit that C.B. Cebulski and Jordan White have put out to destroy like the X-Men line. I just don't believe that whatsoever. He later says, I am hearing more and more and more retailers saying our current trajectory of sales has me thinking that Q1 is going to be totally brutal and I might have to close, downsize, or move to still have a store by the summer. 2 of the 9 current comic stores in San Francisco have already made very public pleas, and I think the rest of us here are wondering if we need to do the same. Stores that I know are run well and run by people who are genuinely passionate about the thing they sell and who stock a wide variety of stock, and all over the country are talking about how brutal the last 2 months have been, and this is right when our holiday sales should be clicking into overdrive. And I think most of us can be adults about this and agree that San Francisco is one of the most progressive cities in the entire United States of America, if not the most progressive city, right? If San Francisco is not a customer for the shit DC and Marvel have been putting out when it comes to the culture war stuff and the pushing the LGBTQ agenda and transing characters and all that kind of stuff, if they can't buy it and people are going out of business, who the fuck is going to buy it? It's literally made for that market. Is Portland going to save comic books? Like, get out of here with this stuff. Not even the people these comic books are designed to appeal to and bring as the new audience want to read this stuff, because the vast majority of these writers aren't comic book writers and they don't have an agenda to tell a good, compelling, awesome superhero story. They have an agenda to come in here and stuff it full of culture war stuff. Now, is that affecting every single comic book at Marvel and DC? Absolutely not. Is it affecting enough of them? I think absolutely it does, especially, if it's hard to get excited about that Batman comic, if it's hard to get excited about that Spider-Man run that might not be woke, but it's just not very good. But then you find out your favorite character, maybe you're a Hawk Family fan, you're like, oh, Jadzia Axelrod is coming to Hawkgirl. I'm not going to see another book with this character in several years. And it's going to be all about her exploring her own personal trauma and whether or not she's considering going trans herself, because she is being influenced by the real star of the comic book Galaxy, the prettiest trans alien character in DC Comics. Well, that's a good reason for me not to come back. So many of these more obscure B, C, even D-list characters are being ruined in the process. You don't have the big titles at the top, and a lot of culture war stuff is, in fact, destroying the enthusiasm for comic book readers, aren't responding to much of what is being published, while at the same time retailers are finding their workload and effort and cost going up while sales are declining. This is a bad potential recipe. And when you hear that stores are closing or are in danger of closing, you should take this news very seriously right now. At some point, and it's a point that might not be very far, losing a certain critical mass of stores will cause the entire direct market side of things to fold like a house of cards. This is very, very reminiscent. It's eerily familiar to exactly what Phil Boyle said at the end of 2023 that Brian Hibbs had to go out and throw a fucking hissy fit about because he said, it's not the culture war stuff, it's other stuff. Really? Then what is it? I know you want to say it's because DC left Diamond and killed the monopoly and created 3 new monopolies in its place or whatever. And I get that, and that absolutely is affecting the bottom line and the revenue potential of a lot of these comic book shops. There's no denying that. But there's no way in hell that somebody that was excited to read Alan Scott the Green Lantern decided to give up on the book because it's not distributed by Diamond Comics anymore. That has nothing to do with the enthusiasm of comic book fans. It has nothing to do with the quality of the stories being told. It has everything to do about the potential viability of these stores. I get that because they aren't able to sell enough. At least Phil Boyle put his balls out there and actually decided to put some real issues along with what's going on. Yes, this is the big picture, and these are the things that I believe are leading up to this. Brian Hibbs is so fucking scared to be honest and actually discuss what is hurting comic books. Is culture war destroying comic books? Is it woke comics that are destroying everything? Absolutely not. That is simplistic thinking. And I do hear people say, yeah, it's just woke. It is not just woke. There are a lot of problems. But woke content, culture war stuff, is absolutely one of the major contributing factors to the quality issue that is going on basically across the entire industry at this moment right now. And there's no denying that. And if you can actually disprove that statement, I would love to hear it, because I've seen so many takes from Brian Hibbs saying that there's a problem, denying that it's culture war, but never actually stating what the real problem with the writing is right now. Why don't you actually be a little bit more specific next time and just tell me what it isn't? Because I know what it isn't. It isn't because Diamond is no longer a monopoly. It isn't because fucking Bob Iger and David Zaslav are dictating the creative directions of Marvel and DC. They do not generate enough revenue to care about to that degree. It is a problem with DC. It is a problem with Marvel. It is a problem with the editorial staffs and the writers that they are hiring to create stories for the greatest heroes in the world, in the greatest entertainment medium in the world, that is basically destroying it this time. Now, there are other factors. The economy is not great, but I do not believe the direct market had to start collapsing at the end of 2023, and we'll see what happens in 2024. And the fact that Brian Hibbs and other influential people, and I'm not sure that Brian Hibbs really is influential at this point anymore, you know, he is a bit of a blowhard, can't actually go out there, put their balls online, and actually say what's wrong is a big reason why nothing can get fixed at this point. It's absolutely insane. I do believe 2024 is going to blow up and be more crazy than you could have imagined. Obviously, we're seeing the beginnings of it at the end of 2023, and I will be covering it right here on the channel, but I'll be covering it in even more depth on the Patreon as well. If you've not checked that one out, over 7 hours of new content every single week. In fact, it'll be up to 8 hours of new content once we start the Comics Guilds next week. A lot of great stuff there. If you haven't checked it out, there's a link in the video description, and I do believe there's a lot of content that you would love there as well.